Welcome to On the Chain.
So we've got the Washington Post, right? We've got this video here. They're talking to, so this Tory Newmeyer is talking to Gillibrand and Lummis about their bill. So they get into a lot of it. It was really long. There's some other things that were within this video as well. So I started here at the 37-minute mark. It goes on to maybe like 45 minutes. We're not going to go through the whole thing. There's some little snippets here that I think are important. Now, one of them is that, you can't see it. There we go. So one of these notions is that, Cynthia Lummis and the bill, so that this bill that they presented in front of Congress gives more authority, more power to the CFTC versus the SEC. Why? Because they look at digital asset as commodities and not securities. But then Lummis actually says one thing within this. Lummis comes out and says that she agrees with Gensler that most of the crypto assets are actually securities. But did she actually say that specifically? Now, the way it's been reported is that there's a conflict in what she said. So she introduces a bill that gives authority to the CFTC, but then she comes out and says something about her agreement with the SEC. But did she say that exactly? And I think we can agree when we hear her actually verbiage that she didn't actually reference it exactly like the media is reporting it. However, there's some really interesting points here. Now, again, the Token Taxonomy Act and CHIPID references. Token Taxonomy Act was short, easy to read, easy to understand, went straight to the point. Whatever the bill is, responsible financial, blah, 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 whatever the name of the bill is like 70 pages long. I read through most of it. There's a lot of language in there, some of the stuff you can skip over, but there are a lot of key important sections in it. That's why it's so long. They packed a ton of stuff in it. They had to address many different areas, but it can get just maybe too much, so we'll see where it ends up going. But let's play this real quick.
And you also do something in this bill where you are creating, I think, a new designation for cryptocurrencies, and you're calling them ancillary assets. Can you describe?
So in the bill, ancillary assets, they reference this over and over again. Responsible Financial Innovation Act. There you go. All right, here we go.
Describe that for us.
Well, that would certainly be like non-fungible tokens and other digital assets that don't have the characteristics of either a store of value or a means of payment.
So it's interesting, they look at these ancillary assets, if it, so an NFT, a store of value like Bitcoin, because they reference Bitcoin a lot, or a means of payment, right? They're also in the bill. They reference stable coins a lot. There's a lot of, tie up within Congress about stable coins. But I think it's interesting here. It's important to really, understand, the notion of where their mindsets are coming from. Now, think about the fact they understand the technology. Senator Lummis from Wyoming, and there's a lot of development within Wyoming, for the crypto asset space in terms of generating economic growth for Wyoming. So think about where she's coming from. Doesn't mean that she understands the technology. We heard, that's why I wanted to play Pat Toomey before, because he's a big supporter of the crypto asset space, as is Warren Davidson. But they don't all necessarily understand all the different elements within the crypto asset space or the blockchain space or the different digital asset. They seem to understand and gravitate to the store of value notion. They understand the Bitcoin notion, the decentralization argument. But then hopefully as they get educated and they understand. So now she's also referencing this form of payment. So I think that it's important. And we have to keep pushing and lobbying our representatives so they do understand. And we have to be very, very vigilant every time they introduce legislation like this to make sure that within the legislation, we don't see anything that could be detrimental from a global perspective on the assets in the United States.
And I think you've overstated. I don't think CFTC is the primary regulator. They just have the obligation to regulate Bitcoin and Ether, the majority of cryptocurrencies today. But the SEC has an enormous responsibility and is going to have to take many of these other cryptocurrencies.
So now Gillibrand here, we know where she falls. So there is also some sort of a divide within the congressional space in terms of their understanding, but yet many of them still fall in this notion that Bitcoin and Ethereum have already been deemed commodities, whereas the others haven't. And this is where we all have a departure from this idea of what they're trying to accomplish. And that's why it's also very important that we understand and we read the language within the bill. So if the language then is referencing specifically stating, a Bitcoin or an Ethereum as a commodity, which they don't, but she's saying already Bitcoin and Ethereum are under the authority of the CFTC, whereas many of the others aren't and will fall under the SEC.
They're going to have to take anything that looks like a security. We use the Howey test as the base, but we further refine the definition of a security. And I can tell you, there's businesses throughout New York City that are desperate to be actually given the ability to be broker dealers, given the ability to be regulated by the SEC. We have players who are asking the SEC to allow them to have an ETF. Waiting for the response. And so we are giving the clarity that the SEC needs so they can actually do the job of regulating a lot of businesses. They're asking for that regulation now.
So this also goes back to Toomey, when Gensler said to Toomey, look, if you want to, you guys have the power to do this. And so anyhow, let's go. Hang on.
So we
Let's fast
refine the
forward.
Howey test and we
Characteristics of securities that will require the SEC's disclosure capabilities. So one has most of the market cap, the other has most of the small tokens that are going to be the larger perpetrators of fraud. So the SEC's role in this is absolutely critical.
So you agree then with Chair Gensler when he says most cryptos are securities under the Howey test. Is that right?
I agree with him.
Yeah.
But now, if you're looking at the sheer numbers, I agree with him.
Chairman Gensler.
So right before this, she had referenced that there's maybe 10 to 15,000 different digital assets out there. So her reference here, and I don't agree, but there are within the digital assets of those 10, 15,000. If you look at the sheer number that are out there, right? Because we're all focused in, hey, XRP, XDC, maybe there's like 10 digital assets and we say, hey, why are you referencing it? So we can look at 10, we can look at 100, but if there's 10,000, 15,000 different digital assets, 20,000 digital assets, then what she's saying is the sheer volume. If you look at the sheer number of them, then yes, there's a good chance that the majority of those digital assets are indeed securities. And there's a good reason as to why they're securities. So, and that's kind of how she referenced it. She didn't say just outright. So some of the media, the way they reported it is that she said, I agree with Gensler that all, that if it's not Bitcoin or Ethereum, that all, that the majority are security. She's saying if you look at the sheer number, so again, not looking at 100, not looking at 1,000, but if you look at 10 to 20,000, then there's a good chance that the majority of those are going to be securities, and many of them are have no real inherent value, either.
Gensler also said that Bitcoin is definitely a commodity.
Yes,
So they're saying Gensler says Bitcoin is a commodity. They always reference and go back to that.
So the public statements, the few public statements he's made about some of these definition issues, we're in agreement. And so we think this framework is the sweet spot of getting most aspects of digital assets and most aspects of blockchain technology into the right regulator without over-regulating, because you have to also recognize people are using tokens for democratization and for community.
Okay. So one of the things that I took out of this also is that, which isn't 100% clear, but as an entity, as a company, you then have the responsibility of your own responsibility to then go to either the CFTC or the CSC or the SEC based on where you think you actually fit. So if you think your asset is a security, then you go to the SEC. If you don't believe it's a security, you think it's a commodity, you go to the CFTC. So once you address that body, and this is within the bill, once you address the body, that body is then responsible for looking through, sitting down with you and identifying whether or not, in fact, yes, we think it might be a security, so let's keep you within the SEC, or no, in fact, it's not. But until there's any clarity right now, it's 100% up to Gensler. And I think this bill needs more dissection. So it's introduced and presented within the Senate. It has to go to Congress. It first has to go through discussion. It has to even pass the Senate. It has to get voted on. They're going to have to push it to the House, and there's going to be more discussion on that. So first and foremost, we'll see if this even gets any legs, because the Token Taxonomy Act kind of sat in and kind of died in Congress, in the House, and now we're going to see what happens with this one.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.